a little strange. It must come from a scale I'm not quite familiar with. We haven't talked about scales in a long time. So, here we go. This is Music Student 101. Your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
All right, welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back.
Welcome, Dr. Matt.
Welcome, Dr. Jeremy.
You're looking good today. How you feeling?
Doing all right. Judging a piano festival this weekend, and
Really?
oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. All sorts of other stuff going on. One of the two colleges I teach at is currently on spring break, so that's a bit of a light week, which is a good thing.
That makes you kind of currently on spring break?
Kind of currently on spring break.
Very cool. Yeah, this is my one day off the whole week.
Oh wow.
Everyone's out there frolicking and flying kites, and I'm going to be
doing what you love, which
is making money for to buy more instruments.
Yeah. Always a thing. Why do they make those things so expensive?
Ah, man, I don't know. It's an exclusive thing, I guess.
Exclusivity, yeah.
Okay, first of all, I want to kind of talk about one of my OCD problems here.
Okay.
This is episode 67.
Okay.
The episode before that, 66,
Right.
we did on vocal, how to take care of your voice.
Right.
But if I had thought about it, today we're going to talk about the hexatonic scales.
We should have done, yeah, I see where you're going with this.
That should have been episode 66.
We missed our numerological moment.
I know. But it's going to be a cool episode because I'm bringing back Lena Joan, my guitar.
Very nice.
And that'll be fun because we're going to talk about some of these scales. Some we're here on the piano. Some actually lend themselves better to a guitar.
Some do.
For example, these blues scales. Well, I don't know. I guess you can play blues scales on anything. Whatever. But can you bend it on the piano? Can you bend it? No.
I could if I had the what you call it, where you bend the pitches, the pitch wheel.
Yeah.
If I had one of those, I could bend it, but I don't.
Well, this going back to this episode again is kind of long overdue because I realized that it had been episode 38, practically more than a year since we last even talked about scales.
Really?
We've been doing all this harmony and counterpoint and kind of throwing that at everybody, but...
Well, like music in general, we have kind of spent a long time sort of caught up in the major and minor scales.
That's true.
Right? Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. As the functioning background of what we're doing.
Exactly.
But the major and minor scales are certainly not the only options out there.
No, as we're going to learn today. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess we could just get right into it, huh?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's hear about... okay, first of all, we have a new review.
Yay!
No, we don't.
No, we don't.
Because there's been no new reviews since the last time we sat down and talked.
Well, that was just anticlimactic.
Wasn't it?
Jeremy? You got my hopes all up.
I know.
For a new review, and there's no new reviews.
And those are usually a little bit shorter, so they're not as crazy to read.
Right.
I think I'm the only one that has the reading problem I'm talking about here. Well, that means one thing. Hopefully, if you guys really feel like you're getting something out of this, go and give us a review.
Go ahead and give us a review. Yeah, it helps expose new people to our podcast.
Uh-huh.
So don't do it for us.
Don't do it for us.
Do it for whose egos are probably as big as they need to be anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Do it for all of those other people who will get exposed to the podcast because you gave us a review that puts us at the top of the podcast charts.
Do it for mankind.
Do it for mankind.
Do it for humanity.
Yes.
Music
do it for world peace.
Music enriches everyone's life.
It does.
And so we're doing our part. Trying to do our part here.
Yeah.
And speaking of doing their part, we are being supported by a new Patreon patron.
Woohoo!
Matt, you want to take this one?
Sure. So Matthew R. from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Matthew. Says, I found out about your show through a thread on r/music theory on Reddit. That's exciting right there. I didn't know we were on Reddit.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people have been saying that they've been hearing.
Wow, we're on Reddit.
It's pretty cool.
That just sounds so hip and cool.
Doesn't it?
It's like to an old fart like me. All right. So he says, where someone else asked for good podcasts about music theory. I can't find the exact thread at the moment. It was months ago. Don't worry. I don't currently play an instrument. To me, music is a hobby, and I don't think it will ever become a profession. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm interested in music theory, composition, arrangement, and production. My interest is mainly in video game music and chiptune.
Chiptune.
Yeah.
Do you know what that is?
I actually do know what chiptune is. He is referring to a musical genre / art form whose origins were in the music of the old 8-bit gaming systems, like the original Nintendo and the original Sega, and possibly even earlier than that, like the old Atari 2600 and what have you. But because they had very, very, very little memory to work with when it came time to write the music to Super Mario Brothers and Metroid and other stuff, they had to do a lot with a little. And, they came up with these sort of MIDI in its infancy kind of timbre-sounding things that were also surprisingly complex in terms of a musical standpoint. And so there's been sort of a genre grow out of that. People who like music that has that sort of sound, and they refer to that as chiptune.
You got people driving around listening to boop, boop, boop,
Yeah.
boop, 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 boop,
Yeah,
boop,
yeah.
boop, boop, boop.
Yeah, hey, yeah, and lest you mock, you remember that song,
Yes,
right?
I do. Always will.
I always remember, and like, the one that always got me was the original Metroid because it had the major second in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, was it that major second?
Possibly.
Maybe, yeah. Like that low major second in the... Yeah. So yeah, that's I actually briefly knew somebody who is big into chiptune music, and he explained
Good.
he explained this to me. So
I'm glad you explained it to me. It makes sense. There's a big comeback in the analog and 80s synth sounds, it seems like.
Oh yeah, everything is new again eventually.
I really want to get into video game music. I think that would be a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it's very popular. A lot of people want to get into video game music now. And it's gotten to the point that video game music is essentially orchestral music.
Right. Which is if you're doing it all through MIDI, you might have a little bit of a challenge making it sound perfect and right and real.
Yeah, you have to have some serious software. And there are sample technology out there that is MIDI powered that makes it sound disturbingly real.
Right.
But yeah. So anyway, Matthew continues. I am self-taught and have never gone to school for music. Your podcast is valuable to me mostly for the theory episodes and ear training exercises, but your episodes on other topics in music that aren't immediately relevant to my interests are a useful way to broaden my musical horizons a bit.
Hey.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
It's always good when we can do that. I've mostly learned music from free online resources such as your podcast and various YouTube channels which discuss musical ideas.
Huh.
Adam Neely, Signals Music Studio, 8-Bit Music Theory, 12-Tone, Ongaku Concept, to list a few. Most of the material out there that I know of is by people from a jazz background or people who are themselves self-taught. Your podcast is valuable to me because it's the only place I know of that I can get more of a classical perspective without enrolling in a music program. Yeah, and that's the hole we're trying to fill.
Yeah.
Honestly. I graduated college long ago, and I wish I'd taken at least a few classes in music at the time, but it's a bit late for that now, so resources like your podcast are valuable to me. Well, we're so glad to be valuable to you, Matthew, and thank you so much for your help and your support. And we hope to continue to inspire you to broaden your horizons and learn a little bit more about music.
Oh, it's never too late.
And it's never too late, yeah.
And I want to say something in regards to some of the resources he was finding because when I was trying to do research for this episode, we talk a lot of theory, but we haven't gotten to some of these advanced scales and some of these weird concepts. You know?
So
as I looked around, as I did more and more research, I found conflicting, stories about some of these things.
Sure, yeah.
So I just kind of ended up going back, researching more and finding the overwhelming majority.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I got my info, plus based on the theory knowledge I already kind of own.
Yeah, and Matthew mentions classical music and knowledge of the classical style, and the classical style definitely definitely finds itself dependent upon major and minor scales and tonal harmonies for several hundred years. Right up until you get into the 20th century. And in the 20th century is when you start getting composers who are experimenting with other scales and other ways to arrange music. But yeah, a lot of what we think of as music theory is very dependent, and classical music theory definitely is very dependent on major and minor scales. But there is other stuff out there.
There is,
and it is fascinating to start thinking about. You know, it'll drive you a little crazy.
Oh, it drove me plenty crazy. You guys are in for a treat.
Oh yeah, this is good stuff.
So thanks again, Matthew from Pennsylvania, for your Patreon patronage and your monthly donation to help support our cause, which is, of course, to share the knowledge and the love of music.
Indeed.
Moving on, we have a listener mail here.
Oh, nice.
Now I decided I would take on this one, even though you had a pretty lengthy Patreon patron thing. Did we talk about this too much? This is our friend has kind of a difficult to pronounce name, but he gave me a detailed explanation. I'm going to try and pull it off here.
Okay.
He's from Chennai, India.
Ooh, nice.
His name, we're going to go with Butri.
Uh-huh.
And then he said, don't worry about the last name.
He probably just knew you'd never get it.
He probably did. He's probably heard me try this many times. Hey, check this out, man. Do you remember that time?
Okay, yeah.
Episode 7.
That one time?
Our 7th episode, yeah.
Oh, wow.
It was
episode 7.
It was on odd time signatures.
That was a different time and place.
It was about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And people actually do write in asking about odd time signatures, and I would like to reference them to that episode and the one that we did on rhythm, which is episode 3.
Right, yeah.
But during this episode 7, towards the end, we were talking about a whole bunch of different examples of songs that included weird time signatures. And I was kind of stumped on one for the moment. It was a song called The Duchess and the Proverbial Mind Spread by our good friends Primus.
Right.
I say good friends because I know them. I've been listening to their music all my life. They don't know me.
We know them from a distance.
But Les, if you're listening, I just want you to come and say hey to me. I don't need to check for $1 million. I just want you to come and have coffee with me. Les Claypool.
Of Primus.
Of Primus. But check it out. But he actually sat down, Bud3 sat down and figured out what the time signature was. And what it is it's really, the song is really an 11.
Yeah,
you know?
Okay, yeah.
During the verse, he's doing 11 with a measure of 5 followed by a measure of 6, which is why the guitar seems to be flipping from downbeat to upbeat.
Okay.
And then during the kind of guitar solo part, the kind of bridge, I guess you would call it.
Yeah,
They're still an 11, but they actually go from a measure of 7 to a measure of 4.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
So hats off to you, Bud3, for putting that together.
Yeah, that's very, very perceptive. And those are sort of the way the beats are arranged. The phrases of the beats are arranged that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Primus is one of these great bands that stumble into some very complex music theory ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You know, largely just by writing music intuitively.
That feels the way they want it to feel.
Yeah. So and we listened to this again, this song.
Yeah.
Before we sat down.
Just now.
Yeah. And my theory is there's a simple story and a complex story, which is great. Because the simple story, you know, you can count it in good old 4/4 and your downbeats will still kind of fall in the right place. Mm-hmm. But that's meter.
Yeah.
You know, what we're talking about with the divided into 11 in classical music would probably be called would be called hypermeter, right? Which is the beat organization of the phrases.
Yeah.
And while Primus is doing a sort of simple meter there that is good old 4/4, their hypermeter is as you and Butri said was a sort of an 11 that is broken into 6 and 5 and then later 7 and 4, which is an Indian classical music way to look at it, actually. So like in Indian classical music, they're not really worried about meters like 4/4 as much as they're worried about these kind of size of the phrases.
Yeah.
and they tend to be much bigger. Yeah, and they tend to do these things like that. So that is, I don't know how that crept into Primus's subconscious, but that's really fascinating, and it's really fascinating how complex music can be sometimes.
Yeah,
it's like even when and a good music theorist, and I struggle to be a good music theorist. A good music theorist tries not to be reductive. I'm gonna say, oh well, that's just 4/4.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, okay. And there's a simple, but then there's the greater complexity. And, we had a lot of fun listening to this thing.
Sounds like me and Guthrie had the more complex version of that.
And that's great. I love that. And I totally agree with you guys about the way the phrasing is structured around the beats. That's super awesome.
Right on. Well, Guthrie is a 22-year-old musician, primarily playing keyboard, but he's looking to pick up bass.
Did we ever mention Jeremy?
Oh, my God. Let's just not do this, Matt.
Okay, all right.
Hey, but you'll know what we're talking about if you've been listening to the episode.
Yes.
We will not say the B word at all this episode. But anyway, he found us on Reddit, too, so there's two.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, he says, your podcast has been very helpful so far. It has the perfect balance of conversation and content that it keeps my attention, and it gives me a few laughs as well.
That's good.
He quoted me, "Let's say a man puts a gun to your head and asks you to tell him the number of sharps in the key of E major." I actually went back and forth in my head about that one, thinking, should I do that?
And the answer was yes, you should.
Apparently it was, yes.
Let's suppose somebody puts a gun to your head and asks you the number of sharps in key major. Well, I would survive, as would our listeners.
Well, Guthrie, thank you very much. Guthrie, thank you very much. He does have two more questions for us.
Okay.
First off, what music schools do you think are worth looking into? Now, there's a lot of music schools out there, Matt. Do you think you could rather just recommend some of the qualities or some of the things you would look for in a good music school?
Yeah, let's see.
I mean, he's in India, right?
Yes.
I know there's correspondence courses, but he seems to think that he says that there's kind of a dearth of good music schools and music teachers in India.
Yeah, Guthrie would be way more the expert on Indian musical education than I would be.
Well, I think he's more talking about just Western theory. Like
in Western music theory, if you're looking for online courses, I would probably just do some research into online courses that are offered by some of the bigger state schools, from America, like the University of Georgia, the University of North Carolina, the University of Indiana, and just see what they offer as sort of online course-wise. A lot of that is going to be, hey, take this online music appreciation course. Yeah. And that may not be what you're looking for if you're looking to learn music theory.
Right.
Again, part of the reason we do this podcast is if you're not in college in America, it's really hard to learn this stuff, right? Yeah. There's not a lot of really complex stuff out there. But look into what they're doing. As far as like maybe physically being in a place, anything that says conservatory is unlikely to let you in without you taking a big audition that you will not do well with unless you have been playing piano since you were 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in my experience a little more open place to go to, a smaller school,
Yeah.
that has a longer name. Look for because it'll always be the University of something in some kind of city, right? And that can often be easier to get in. If you're going to college for something else, definitely look at their music program.
Yeah.
Look at maybe minoring in music. 'Cause any minor in music, you can usually take the first 2 theory courses. Is part of a minor, and you don't have to commit yourself to, the whole shebang. If you're looking to commit yourself to the whole shebang, then definitely start looking at European and American music schools and any college has a decent one. But look for a place where you feel comfortable. Look for a place that that is doing what you want to do. Go visit colleges that have, and see what the feel is like. Are these a bunch of conservatory kids who are very, very into like classical music, and that's not necessarily what you want, or maybe that is what you want, and you feel right at home, right? Or is it a bunch of kids who played in garage bands in college, who came together and are making a music school, is that what you want?
Yeah.
It's a difficult and very personal process looking into music schools.
Yeah. Well, what about are there any statistics or numbers that you can look for? Like, I don't know what the word for would be, but like turnaround rates or
yeah. Yeah, I would have to do some research. I'll tell you that any information like that you find about colleges in the States, at least, they tend to have super high matriculation rates.
Uh-huh.
And which means people who graduated with a degree.
Yes.
Graduation rates. They tend to have really high graduation rates in the 90s or something like that. If they don't have high graduation rates, they don't post their graduation rate.
Okay.
So yeah, it can be hard to get a good sense of that way to me. There are advantages and disadvantages to going into a place that takes in a lot of students.
Yes.
A place that takes in a whole lot of students tends to have a whole lot of resources.
Uh-huh.
But you're going to be one in a crowd.
Yeah, it's harder to get those office hours in with your teacher, individual attention, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're going to end up hanging out with the same 2 or 3 or 4 people that you would anyway. There's just going to be a whole lot more people on your periphery. Mm-hmm. Was my experience in bigger schools.
Sure.
Whereas with smaller schools, it's a lot easier to get that personal attention. You don't feel like just a face in the crowd. You feel like a part of that community. But you're often struggling to get the resources. Mm-hmm. It's often a struggle to get exactly what you want out of because there's not as much infrastructure there. So it's a very personal thing.
Well, we here at Music Student 101 encourage education. We like education. Mm-hmm. But not everyone can afford a college university, so just keep on listening to Music Student 101. We're sympathetic.
And I would encourage them to email me back with more specifics, like are you looking to come to the States and attend a college, or are you looking for like online courses? With a little more specifics about what he's looking for, I could probably answer his question a little more exactly.
I'm going to copy you on his message.
Good plan.
Bud3 has one more question before we move on,
okay.
Actually. He says, do you or Matthew do Skype lessons for bass?
We've had a couple of people ask us this. Do we give any kind of lessons or anything? And I guess my answer is I haven't, but I'm open-minded.
Yeah.
Maybe if there's enough interest out there to make it something that I really feel like I need to be doing, then I could see myself doing that at some point in the future.
Very cool.
Yeah. What about you?
My answer for now has got to be no, because for one thing, I'm pretty swamped with work in this podcast as it is.
Yeah.
And I've tried teaching bass before, but I don't know, man. I might just be all over the place. I think I try to add a little more theory into my lessons, which actually might be what these people, our listeners, might be looking for.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
I definitely would be more comfortable teaching theory than bass.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. But just because I deal with it more, and it's more for the intellectual side of my brain where bass kind of comes out of my gut or something,
Well, maybe we can be thinking about that, and if you decide to do that, Matt, Bud3 can be one of the first to know about it.
Yeah. We'll keep you informed.
Let me say one other thing about our listeners now that we're done with this little social section here. If you have written to me, like I said, I have a flag system.
Uh-huh.
Red means I have not responded. Orange means I've responded, but I haven't heard back from you.
Yeah.
Just know that I have found 1 or 2 messages in my trash.
Ooh, oh no.
And I now have to regularly go through and make sure that these things didn't automatically end up in my trash.
Right.
If you have not heard from me, in about a month. That's what I'm trying to give myself no more than a month to get back with people, and I feel bad about that as it is.
Yeah.
But if you haven't heard back from me, maybe try me again. Maybe hit me up on Facebook to make sure I can get that message and know to look through my emails.
Yeah.
That's probably the way to go, because I think that some of these people might have emailed me and thought that I just wasn't getting back to them.
And I can tell you, Jeremy does make a massive effort to respond to everybody.
I try.
And respond to everybody in detail too, not just a thumbs up and then we move on, but try to like actually specifically answer questions. So we get a little backlogged.
See, that's another thing. You'll never get an email from me saying, "Hey, sounds good. Thanks, bro. Bye." Send.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
So,
we do try to actually address the issues you bring up, which just means that it takes a little time. And especially if he ever has to defer a question to me, that takes even more time, because I'm ridiculously slow about these things.
unless it's a theory question.
Unless it's a theory question. Yeah. My actual boss has a hard time getting responses out of me. So unless we talk about theory, and then I get
Slip a theory question in the first paragraph, and then have your attention.
There you go. There you go. But yeah, just be patient. We are definitely getting to you.
Right. Yeah. And fortunately, we're at this point, we're not so big to where we can still answer everyone's emails.
Yeah, really. Is getting bigger. We used to have 1 or 2 emails a month, and we could get to them within a day, and then talk about them on the very next podcast. And that's not the way it is anymore. But
well,
we're still able to stay on top of it for now, which is a good thing.
And you don't know the oxytocin boost I get when I get that little notification in my mailbox. Oh, a listener!
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it?
Yeah,
I love it. And such good comments and questions and insights.
Well, that's another thing.
We have some smart people listening to this podcast.
That's another thing. People ask questions that often involve me looking up things,
looking up the answer and coming up
to the YouTube videos, or they recommend a video. See what you think about this guy's take on jazz.
Yeah. One listener even nailed me contradicting myself one time. So
Do we know who that is?
Yes, we know who that is. He who shall not be named.
The name who shall not be mentioned. Jason, Jay the guitar player. Oh, man.
Good stuff.
Well, let's get on to these hexatonic scales, man.
Yeah, let's do that.
Now, we know that these scales are used a lot in rock, metal, and blues music.
Yep.
It's also been used in a lot of European folk genre.
And in Russian folk music as well.
Yeah, Russian folk, Celtic folk music. Not unlike the pentatonic scales, they sound evil. Hexatonic sounds kind of evil, doesn't it?
It can.
But don't worry, they're not evil.
No. They're just notes.
Unless you made a deal with the devil to learn them.
Right. And then it was the making the deal with the devil that was probably evil, not the actual information.
The scales are just innocent bystanders.
The scales are just scales, yeah.
Well.
Yeah. So, the big thing about hexatonic scales is they are 6-note scales.
6 notes. It's a very intimidating name, but it just basically means 6-note scale.
Yeah, a 6-note scale. And that's a sort of a deceptively simple thing, because it's not just about being 6 notes. Many of them are what we call symmetrical scales.
Yes.
And others are simply just 6-note scales. For example, the major hexatonic scale is essentially the major scale without the scale degree 7. So it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1.
Yeah. Not a big deal.
Now, actually, I've heard a little bit of, back to the conflicting reports that I've heard, there was 1 or 2 people that were saying that the hexatonic major scale would be 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. But to me, that just sounds...
That sounds like what we would call a cyclic permutation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, where we have taken the intervals of the major hexatonic scale and started on a different one. But you can find a note within that 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. That then, and it's probably 5 that would become 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3. That would be the hexatonic scale as we described it.
Interesting.
Yeah, because the intervals are what really make up a scale, right? Go back to episode 3 with a combination of half steps and whole steps to make up the major scale. So if we said, you said it was
Nixing the fourth instead of the seventh.
so yeah, so if I say 5, 6, 7, yeah, so you're right. So if I do that, started on 5, and assume I'm in the G major hexatonic instead of C major hexatonic, I've just done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and nixed the 7th. So you're either way,
Okay.
right? The intervals are consistent, and that's what makes it the hexatonic scale. Skipping the 7th, which gives us that
Movement.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of that actual minor third. Skipping the 7th, which gives us that minor third.
Yeah.
In there, you know. Yeah, and
wait. Recognize that?
Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, off the top of their head there.
Right, totally.
But yeah, so if you skip the 4th and get the minor third instead, you've still got a minor third amongst a bunch of halves and whole steps. Bunch of whole steps.
Oh, and I guess what I did was just pentatonic also. 1. That was actually pentatonic.
These are all sort of subsets of the major scale right
Yes.
now, you know. So and so that's why you can sort of do that.
Pentatonic plus 1.
Right. Yeah.
So-
you get that cyclic permutation thing. You do that. You can do that with the pentatonic scale too, and people get different ideas of what scale degrees from the major scale actually connotate the pentatonic. And it's because of that cyclic permutation thing. They started somewhere different in creating their scale.
And one more time for me,
Right.
could we explain cyclic or cyclic permutations?
Cyclic permutation is just taking notes from the beginning of this scale or pitch collection or what have you and placing them at the end.
Okay.
So in one permutation, you would take the first note of the scale and put it towards the end, and then in the next permutation, you would take the first 2 notes, put it at the end, and so on and so forth. And so with a lot of these differences in what notes you keep and take out in some of these pentatonic and hexatonic scales, they can be explained that way. That they're just arranging them differently, but you're coming up with the same scales.
Okay. And they keep the same sequence.
They keep the same pattern of half steps and whole steps.
Right. Okay. Right. So, and it's almost like you're inverting the scale. You're doing kind of inversions, or is that a proper way to say it?
I'd be careful of that word.
Okay.
That word has some music theory connotations.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Well, how about this? All the modes, for example, are cyclic permutations of each other.
Indeed, yeah.
Right.
Well, they're all cyclic permutations of the major scale.
Of the major scale.
The 7 common church modes are cyclic permutations of the major scale.
So if you're taking the Ionian or the major scale, I do not want to C major, but you bump it up. You take if we're using C for example, you stick that C at the end. You're left with a D at the beginning. So now you're in the Dorian mode,
Right.
A cyclic permutation of the Ionian mode.
Right.
Okay, I think I get it.
Awesome.
Okay, well that's the major hexatonic, and for right now, let's just go ahead and say that it's basically the major scale nixing scale degree 7.
Yes. If you want to say it is the major scale nixing scale degree 4, that will also work. You'll just be creating different major scales.
Right. Yeah. But for our purposes right now, major hexatonic,
Yes.
we'll stick with this nixing the 7th thing, huh?
We'll stick with that. Right.
Moving on.
There's also, as you might have guessed by now, the minor hexatonic, which is just nixing the 6th.
Right. Okay. So I will play a minor scale, and I'll leave out the 6. Okay.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 1.
Yeah. Which is a minor pentatonic, but also a scale degree 2. Right.
And you still have the flat third, which gives it that minor-ishness,
Yeah.
even though the flat 6 would have made it even more minor-y. You know?
Yeah.
So nixing the 6 on that minor.
The flat 6 would have kind of made it classical music minor-y. Yeah, well, this is kind of more blues music minor-y or folk music minor-y.
I can definitely hear that.
In my extraordinarily subjective aesthetic opinion.
That's all right. I can hear it.
Yeah. So, So there you go. And then the blues scale, which is famous.
Yeah.
Right? There is the thing about the blues scale is that it has what is considered a blue note.
The blue notes.
So like one little chromatic addition that makes it bluesy.
Yeah.
Right. So in the case of the blues, the major scale, we add flat 3, so we have both flat 3 and regular 3.
Okay.
So, and then flat 7.
Mm-hmm.
So 1, 2, flat 3, 3, 5, flat 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of feel, right?
Definitely.
Minus the missed note.
Sometimes when I'm playing in a major key and I just want to throw something kind of cool into the bass, I do this kind of a.
Oh yeah.
So it's a flat 3 hammering onto a major 3.
Oh yeah. So that, that flat 3 isn't real. It's not always just sort of like a stable kind of. Sometimes it's almost like an ornament.
Or passing tone, maybe? Would you consider it a passing tone?
Maybe.
If you ask some people, I think there's a little bit of controversy on whether these are even scales or if those notes are just kind of inflections.
Yeah.
Or kind of not as incidental or.
Yeah.
Not as.
Because, again, traditional European classical music lends a lot of weight to the idea of the note belonging to the scale.
Mm-hmm.
We have a name for that. We call it a diatonic note.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of these other musical styles from which a lot of these things originated, pay a lot more attention to the idea of a note that's an inflection.
Yeah.
Not a note, quote unquote, in the classical sense, but an inflection.
Mm-hmm.
A stylistic expression kind of thing. And a lot of those things, like the flat 3, originated from styles that paid more attention to that.
Yeah.
You translate it into Western music theory and you call it a flat 3, and then it kind of becomes like a note in the scale,
yeah.
Right? Which is a scale being a collection of a certain number of notes, right?
Right.
So yeah, I can see where that could stir up some controversy.
Right on.
Know your origin.
Know your origin, yeah. Which is basically Africa.
Which is basically Africa, but then those kinds of inflections in Africa originated in influences from the Middle East when they traded across the Sahara Desert and things, and brought Arabic and Middle Eastern musical ideas to Africa, and it's a fascinating stuff to get into. So somebody should do a podcast.
Somebody should. Okay, so one more time, the blues major scale.
Blues major scale.
1, 2, flat 3, 3, 5, flat 7, 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the blues hexatonic minor scale is 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7.
Okay, so there's that flat 5 in there that makes the difference in this case.
Yeah.
It's basically a minor pentatonic.
Sure, yeah.
Adding
the flat 5.
What if I bend it from flat 5 up to 5?
Yeah, bluesy, man.
Yeah.
Nice.
Very cool. What else can be said about that?
I don't know. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Very interesting scale, very bluesy. It's got all those blues notes in it.
All the blues notes.
Blue notes, I guess, as we called them.
Yeah. All of those flats and things.
Flat 3, flat 5, and flat 7.
Yeah.
No 6, you're nixing the 6.
Yep, no
You're
6, no 2.
Nixing the 2. All right, man. I'm going to give Lena Joan a little break for the whole tone scales because I have a hard time negotiating some of these crazier things on the guitar.
Things a little more designed for piano, I think.
Let's see what you got there, Matt.
All right, so the whole tone scale,
Uh-huh.
it is technically speaking a hexatonic scale because there are 6 notes in it.
Mm-hmm.
It is, however, a very special kind of thing.
Yeah?
The whole tone scale is a scale that is made up of nothing but whole steps. So if you go all the way back to one of our earliest episodes when we talked about the major scale, we talked about that fingerprint, that whole step, half step, and then 3 whole steps and another half step that made it the major scale. Mm-hmm. We could sort of outlay that pattern starting with any note and create a major scale.
Uh-huh.
Well, the whole tone scale has nothing but whole steps. Whole step, whole step, whole step, whole step, whole step, whole step.
Easiest pattern to remember that I can think of.
Yeah, so it kind of sounds like if somebody's about to start doing a dream sequence in an old TV show or something, or a flashback. You know?
Yeah. Kind of disorienting.
Yeah.
Tonal center, ambiguous.
Tonal center, non-existent.
Non-existent, ooh.
Yeah, more than simply ambiguous. It is completely non-existent. The fact that there is nothing but whole steps means there are no tendency tones.
No tendency tones.
There are no tones that want to pull in one particular direction or another.
Mm-hmm.
So without that, we can't orient ourselves to any tonic whatsoever. Which one of those notes sounded like tonic?
None of them.
Exactly.
None of them.
Exactly. Now, if I play around in this scale, sing tonic,
Yeah, just
I
can pick any note, honestly, and just be stabbing in the dark.
Yeah, there is no tonic.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to create a tonic out of a bunch of whole steps. So that is really a really fascinating characteristic of it. Another really fascinating characteristic of this particular scale is that there are only 2.
Yeah.
This is a scale that we call symmetrical.
Yes.
Meaning that the interval combination is a repeating pattern. So the distances are never. So the entire chromatic scale, rather, all 12 notes get divided up evenly,
mm-hmm.
right? So there's always the same distance between every note of this scale,
mm-hmm.
And it'll go all the way around the major scale and do that and be symmetrical.
Yes.
Because of that, we can't create a whole tone based on any note the way we could do with the major or minor scale. We can't take that pattern and lay it on any note and have 15 transpositions of the major scale and then 15 transpositions of the minor scale. There are only 2 transpositions of the whole tone scale.
Convenient.
Convenient, yes. There is the one that starts on C. Yeah. And there is the one that starts on C sharp.
And what we just heard was all 12 notes of the whole all 12 notes of the chromatic scale.
Exactly. The one on C has 6, and the one on C sharp has 6, and those are the only 2 you can create. If I were to try to create a whole tone scale on D, and I just went up a whole step every single time, that's just the C whole tone scale. That's the 6 notes out of the C whole tone scale.
Same notes.
Same notes. Yeah. Consequently, if I try to create a whole tone scale on E flat, and I went up whole steps every time, that is just C sharp whole tone.
Yes. Symmetrical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a person who was conversing with me online once about whole tone scales, and he was sort of bragging that he had created this piece that starts in C whole tone and then modulates to G whole tone, and then there's this A sharp whole tone period. And I tried to explain to him that those are all the same whole tone scale, and he blocked me. You're trying to help some people,
He blocked you.
Yeah, I was like, well, I just hear it as a G whole tone, and I thought, well, that's interesting, but objectively, you just hear whole tone.
Right.
It's the same notes, and there's really no such thing as a tonic in a whole tone. So you're just hearing whole tone.
Sometimes it's hard to hear when you think you got something figured out, and then you you find out that you don't.
I guess, yeah. And I try not to be one of these people just throwing a bunch of education around or anything. But
No, you're pretty diplomatic. I can't see you being like, no, idiot.
no moron. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I was, but he blocked me, so I guess there's no helping some people. But anyway, take my word for it.
It's a thing.
There are only 2 whole tone scales in existence.
Very cool.
And, you'll hear them called C whole tone and C sharp whole tone. You will hear them called whole tone 1 and whole tone 2.
Interesting.
Because C and C sharp don't really have any special role in these scales either.
No.
So for a lot of people, they're just pitch collections. So they're called WT1 and WT2, or WT0 and WT1, which refers to the pitch class of C and C sharp.
Which is classes, which we'll talk about at some point.
We will talk about pitch classes at some point. Don't you worry. We got to finish tonal harmony first.
Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, so they're asymmetrical. There's no leading tone. There's no 4 trying to pull down to 3. There are no tendency tones at all, so there's no tonal center. This is a whole tone. This is a scale that was first became prominent, and some people can argue that it goes all the way back. That it arose from traditional musics, but it was definitely found in the beginning in the middle of the 19th century. Mm-hmm. So Franz Liszt would experiment with it as ways to create sort of a fantastical feel.
Yeah.
All of the late 19th century stuff, 1850 on, they were really into programmatic music, telling a story through music, setting a stage in music, making you feel like you're floating on a cloud or something like that. So Franz Liszt would use it to create that fantastical, that otherworldly element, as would Modest Mussorgsky, who was sort of a contemporaneous with Liszt thereabouts, but in Russia. Yeah, Liszt being in France.
Yeah.
And, Bela Bartok, who was an actually avid collector of folk musics from around Europe.
Yeah, man. I love Bartok. I love his style and
he was
weirdness.
He was really into that stuff, and sort of codified a type of music theory based around those folk things. He wrote a lot of papers expressing how European music needed to go back to these folk and traditional things to discover new avenues to carry the classical music forward. He was a big proponent of that, and an interesting person.
If you've ever seen The Shining, then you've heard Bartok.
Oh yes, you have.
That's his music on The Shining.
Yeah. He did
music for Celeste and percussion, I think it is.
Yeah, which is one of his most famous. It's probably his most famous big piece. Yeah. I would dare venture. And he wrote other things. He wrote a set of short piano pieces that are very, very popular. And he wrote some string quartets that are very, very popular. Not really quoting folk musics, but not really using the musical construction of folk musics, but using sort of his music theories that he had devised based on those folk musics. And the whole tone scale was a big part of his music, as was other hexatonic scales.
Yeah.
Because of this.
By the way, have you heard this fantasy and fugue on the chorale Ad nos ad salutarum udum?
The Liszt piece?
Yeah.
Probably.
It's an organ piece.
Okay.
And to watch someone perform it is pretty amazing because they're pulling out the stops and they're doing all the...
Yeah.
And it really is a very dense piece. Like the music is... There's this one big chord.
Yeah.
It's just dense whole tone.
Liszt was famous for his virtuoso keyboard skills. And you put him on organ and he's asking you to pull the stop with one hand while still playing with the other one. And
that's evil. That's just evil.
Yeah, I have probably heard that at some point. I probably should go back and listen to it again.
There's a lot of music out there, man.
Yeah.
A lot of music.
There is. The whole tone scale really came into its own prominence, though, in the early 20th century with the Impressionists.
Yeah.
With people like Claude Debussy.
This is also some of my favorite music for some reason.
Yeah.
Some of that French composers.
Yeah, it was it was fascinating. So French Impressionism in music coincided with French Impressionism in art.
Yeah.
Right, where you have these paintings that are not trying to be as realistic as possible, but trying to also sort of capture the mood.
Mm-hmm.
And they would be kind of cloudy. Think of Starry Night.
Yeah.
Think of Van Gogh's work.
Yeah.
And Picasso and some of those people. And you're trying to do the same thing in music. So a lot of what Debussy was doing was trying to cloud the idea that there's a tonic to which we are moving towards, which he considered a very German idea. Not great already at the beginning of the 20th century, and also something that he just wasn't trying to do. So this whole tone scale, had that dreamy quality that he was really trying to go for. And so Debussy used it a lot, as did Paul Dukas, as did Eric Satie, as did a lot of the early 20th century composers, and also Igor Stravinsky, ever looking for new sources of fun stuff to do, experimented with the whole tone scale, and even some strict German serialists like Alban Berg. You can find instances of the whole tone in his music too.
So there's the whole tone scale.
There you go. That is the whole tone scale, and it's an extraordinarily simple concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's an extraordinarily simple scale with some sort of highfalutin concepts attached to it.
Yes. Safe to say. Real quick, you want to mention the other symmetrical scales since we?
Yeah, sure. It is the whole tone is just one.
These aren't necessarily hexatonic.
Yeah,
right?
These aren't necessarily hexatonic, so we won't talk about them a whole lot this time. Okay, so there are other symmetrical scales that we will talk about, not necessarily hexatonic, so we'll maybe have to talk about them later.
Yes.
But yeah, there are also other symmetrical scales. The diminished scale, the chromatic scale technically is a symmetrical scale, all 12 notes. The augmented scale, the symmetrical augmented scale, which is a hexatonic scale, and we will talk about it right now.
Yes, we will.
And then the octatonic scale, which is another one used by Russian folk music and also used in Debussy and things, and have to talk about that later.
An episode for another day.
Yes. So there you go. But the augmented scale, the way this scale works is you alternate between a half step and a minor third as you go up the scale. So if I start on C, and then I go up a minor third, and then I go up a half step, and then I go up a minor third, and then I go up a half step, and then I go up a minor third.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty crazy, huh?
Ooh, I can hear there is a little bit more movement in this one because we have that 7th scale degree.
Yeah, so that leading tone kind of creates more of a sense of a scale.
By the time you get to that note.
Yeah.
But if you continue it, if you keep on going,
yeah.
would we get that same?
I don't know. Let's find out. So I always have to think a minute before I can play this scale.
It's weird stuff.
Oops.
It's almost like blues meets the Middle East.
Something like that, yeah. But it is also a symmetrical scale. Because of that half step minor third situation, there are a limited number of times we can transpose this.
Right.
Before we just get the same notes again.
So where in the whole tone scale we're talking about just the distance between the notes themselves, now we're kind of talking about the symmetry being in the collection of notes, right?
Right, yeah. Well, there is a symmetry in the collection of notes in both of those. It's just in the whole tone, the symmetry is extraordinarily simple. One whole step between each one of them. This one, there's also, symmetry between half step, minor third, half step, minor third.
Patterns, I guess, is what I was trying to say.
That pattern is what creates the symmetry. So all of the notes of the chromatic scale will fall into one version of the augmented scale. I want to say, and somebody call me on this if I'm saying this wrong, I want to say there are 3 augmented scales.
I don't know. Should we skip that?
Well, we'll say that. We'll see if somebody can call me on it.
Okay. All right.
I need to look that back up. I need to crack open my 20th century theory book and crack that back. But I want to say there are 3 augmented scales.
Okay.
So, but somebody correct me on that if I'm wrong.
Well, actually, that makes sense because if you're going, the space between the first 2 notes are a minor third.
Yeah.
And you have, for example, if you're starting in C, you have the possibility of a C augmented scale.
Yeah.
C sharp augmented scale.
Yeah.
D augmented scale.
Yeah.
Before you're back at that.
Before you're back
third.
to the 3. Yeah. And I was also thinking of, the minor thirds being at 3, 6, 9, and 0 on the clock. Of the 12 notes.
Yeah.
Right. And then so you just add half steps behind each one of those.
Rotate.
And you can rotate that 3 times.
Okay.
But again, if I'm wrong, somebody please tell me.
Please.
But so yeah, there you go.
Augmented scale.
Yeah, the augmented scale. Very, very interesting scale.
And again, that is the pattern repeats where the pattern is a minor third and then a semitone.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Or a semitone, then a minor third.
Ah.
It'll just put you on a different one.
Right.
It'll just put you on a different one of the augmented scale, of the limited augmented scales there are.
And it won't make much of a difference because one doesn't sound much different than anything else on this crazy scale, does it?
Yeah. There is then the tritone scale. So named for the tritone inherent within it.
Yeah.
For the more than one tritone inherent within it, in fact.
I don't anticipate this to be a very soothing scale.
Well, let's find out. 1, flat 2, 3, flat 5, 5, flat 7. Wasn't that bad?
Nah.
Well, I mean, when you try to make chords out of it, is when when you get the fun stuff. But
yeah.
Yeah, that's fun.
Again, it feels like blues meets Middle Eastern kind of music because of this between the, let's see here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, between the 3 and the flat. No, where am I hearing that weird thing?
You may be hearing a tritone between 1 and flat 5.
Let's hear that whole scale one more time.
Okay. All right, hold on.
Gosh, I don't know.
It sounds a little Phrygian.
It sounds a little Phrygian.
Yeah, right there, because of the half step between 1 and 2.
The flat 2.
Yeah. But it also has the tritones between 1 and flat 5, and then between flat 2 and 5. And then is this also a tritone between 3 and flat 7? Oh, that's a perfect fifth.
Ah.
But yeah.
There's a little bit of love in there somewhere.
Yeah.
A little angel among the demons.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Inharmonically equivalent to the Petrushka chord.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Petrushka chord.
So the Petrushka chord
even though this is an episode on scales.
Yes. Well, the Petrushka chord is a highly controversial chord that made its way into my dissertation.
Did it?
Yes, it did. And it's named from its use in Stravinsky's ballet Petrushka, in which we have, in the left hand, an F-sharp major chord. Pretty simple. And in the right hand, we have a C major chord. And we put those two together. There you go.
Jeez.
That arpeggiation was how it showed up in Petrushka.
It sounds like somebody picked up a mandolin and just detuned it and played on one course, but the 2 notes were just different. It sounds out of tune to me is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but so that tritone scale does is create two major chords of tritone apart.
Yeah.
And that's what the Petrushka chord is.
So
F and C and F sharp.
Am I right that you don't get much further apart at all before you start moving backwards towards the tonic?
You don't get any further apart whatsoever before you start moving back towards the tonic. The tritone apart is from 0 to 6. From 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, if you think about a clock face. So yeah, after 6, you're moving back towards the 12 o'clock position. That is the exact opposite.
And so you have a C major chord and then an F sharp major chord, right?
Yes.
So between the C and the F sharp, you have a tritone. Between the E and the A sharp, you have a tritone. And then between the G and the C sharp, you have a tritone.
None of those notes are in both of the chords. They are
exclusive.
Exclusive.
Yeah, mutually exclusive.
Yeah, but both subsets within the tritone scale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting stuff, huh?
The Petrushka chord.
Yeah. Also, the tritone scale and these two chords are themselves subsets of the octatonic scale. Yeah. So yeah, it starts getting interesting.
Wow.
So let's hear that tritone scale one more time.
Tritone scale, just in its abstract. Yeah.
And if you play all 6 of those notes together, you have. Good God.
Yeah, you have the tritone, the Petrushka chord.
Boy,
Good old Stravinsky.
it would take me a long time to pick that apart.
Well, there's small wonder why when they first premiered Rite of Spring, people rioted, right? They literally jumped up and started throwing things, and Stravinsky had to be secreted out the back so people wouldn't, maul him and stuff.
Oh, boy. Lynch mob?
Yeah, greatly angered these people were.
Jeez. Oh, wow. Okay, well, I guess the next one I think we have is the one that I could find. Yeah, I mean, there was not a lot of examples on this thing.
The Prometheus chord. This is such a fascinating thing.
The Prometheus scale.
The Prometheus scale, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I learned it as a chord, 6-note chord. But
It can be, actually. Yeah. And we'll have to get you to show us that on the piano because I don't think I can do that on my guitar. But because I could not find a lot of examples of it, actually, let's talk about it a little bit.
Let's talk about it a
play
little
the example.
bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So the simple version of this is that this is a Mixolydian mode with a sharp 4. So it's got a sharp 4 and a flat 7 compared to the major scale.
Okay.
So, right, you want to play it? You play it.
Yeah, I'll play it.
Okay.
Since I had to learn it so much. I'm going to use D for this one.
Okay.
D major, or I guess D Promethean.
Okay.
Prometheus. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, sharp 4 or flat 5, 6, flat 7.
Flat 7.
Jeez, one more time.
Yeah. There you go.
Didn't sound like the tonal center of it anymore, did it?
All these scales, man, they just kind of, my ears are.
I know, I can't tell heads from tails.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
The Prometheus scale.
Fun stuff, huh?
So this was coined back in 1916 by author Eaglefield Hull.
Okay.
Who was a biographer of Russian composer Alexander How do you say it, Matt?
Scriabin.
Scriabin. Yeah. Scriabin used this in a lot of his later works, but it was mainly featured in Prometheus, the Poem of Fire.
Right. Hence the term Prometheus scale.
Back in 1910.
Or the Prometheus chord, which is just all 6 notes played as a chord, right?
Yeah. Do you know the story behind Prometheus, Matt?
He's the guy who gave man fire.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, gave fire to man, and Zeus kind of got pissed off at him for that, and
so
something bad happened.
He had a fine punishment, very much in the style of Zeus. So again, Prometheus was the Titan. His name is Greek for forethought. Thinking ahead. Maybe he didn't put a lot of forethought into giving man fire because Zeus decided to punish him by tying him to a rock,
Uh-huh.
and every day an eagle would fly down and eat his liver. And then at the end of the day, or overnight, I suppose, however that worked, the liver grows back.
And then the eagle comes and eats it again.
Morning,
I
Sam.
do remember
Morning,
that now.
Ralph.
Yeah.
The eagle comes in. And poor Prometheus,
Really? Yeah.
eventually rescued by Hercules.
Oh, good. Well,
But this strange scale, and it can also be made into a mystical chord. Let's hear all those. Let's hear that as a chord, can we? With the D
yeah.
root.
So, with just a little preparation on my part. Or sorry.
Wow. Yeah. Craziness.
Sounds very Scriabin-esque to me, but then again, I guess
It can only
really-
sound Scriabin because that's the only song I know where he used that.
Yeah.
Well,
This scale actually has a lot of the sharp 4 and the flat 7 show up in a bunch of different places in a bunch of in a bunch of different ways.
yeah.
Yeah, and called a bunch of different things. So it's the Prometheus scale when you're talking about Scriabin. And the mystic chord. Isn't that chord also called the mystic chord?
It was very mystical, and it is called the mystic chord.
Yeah. A lot of Russian composers use it in much the same way the French use whole tone scales. It's sort of as a way of creating a sense of mystic otherworldliness.
Yeah.
You know.
If you want a recognizable melody that is based off the Prometheus scale, I suggest you go back and listen to the intro bumper track of this episode, because there's 2 sections. There's an A section, and I'm doing. So that's 3 1 flat 5 2 3 1 6 7 1.
Nice.
And then the B section, where actually I'm starting from the B note. B section, B note, haha.
Rah.
But we're in the key of D, so this is starting on the 6th. And it's actually same little last part, but it's actually 6 3 7 flat 5 6 3. Same ending.
Nice work.
So you'll be able to hear those 2 different
Yeah.
parts, all based on the Prometheus scale.
Jeremy is very good at the getting the experimental ideas into the bumper music.
Sometimes some of the coolest stuff I end up coming up with is because I sat down and tried to mess with a 7 of 4 or some kind of crazy, new things
absolutely.
that I have to learn to teach about.
Right.
I'm like, well, I'm going to slip this in the music and see if I can fully understand how this sounds. You know
Yeah,
what I
isn't
mean?
teaching music great?
It is. So that is my interpretation of the Prometheus scale and the mystic chord.
You can also hear this scale
Uh-huh.
in a piece of music by, I think it's Witold Szymanowski. This is the beginning of his Prelude number 1. And then, again, made its way into my dissertation. This is the only reason I remember this. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, and that is a Prometheus scale. But of course, this composer called it a Podalian mode.
Crazy.
Yeah, and it's also been referred to by lovers of set theory as an acoustic collection. And like this is not a symmetrical scale. Like the acoustic collection, this can be transposed 12 times.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Full 12.
Yeah, so you
full
can
Monty.
lay out the pattern along any note.
All right, Matt. Would you believe me if I told you it's about to get weird?
It hasn't been weird, so
It's about to get weirder.
okay.
Oh man, let's talk about making hexatonic scales from triad pairs.
Oh, let's talk about hexatonic scales from triad pairs. This is so just dancing around my dissertation so much that I'm just loving this right now.
There's been a lot of reminiscing moments on this episode already.
About my dissertation, yeah, which,
in past episodes, odd time signatures.
Odd time signatures, my dissertation,
Yeah.
which was, traumatic and, but yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, but now it's about to get weird.
Yeah. So let's see here. It's pretty much what it sounds like. We're gonna show you a few examples, and I hesitate to say they're gonna sound very different from each other, just because this is all just chaos. This is all crazy.
Depends on how refined your ear really is.
Exactly, and to my ear, which is not quite as refined yet, I have to listen to this episode a few times.
Yeah, admittedly, that's some challenging level of ear refinement. I will go ahead and say, don't feel terrible if you can't really hear the difference between all of these.
Well, let's just go ahead and hit the ground running, shall we?
Okay,
Matt?
yeah. So, well, first of all, what we're talking about here is putting triads together to create hexatonic scales.
Mutually exclusive triads.
Mutually exclusive triads, meaning they can't have any notes in common.
Yeah, no common tones.
Yeah. Okay.
So an example of the major minor, we're going to say it's basically from the major triad with a minor triad, and these two are placed a tone apart. So, for example, can we use C major and D minor?
So C major, D minor, and we are going to play those notes.
6 tones. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's even more interesting if you think about them as sort of spread out. So.
Yeah. That's a little more digestible.
Yeah.
Than to have them all bunched up together.
Yeah, this is kind of what Shimonovsky did with the spread it out so you can sort of digest. So.
That's beautiful. That's actually beautiful.
Yeah.
But in the case of this major minor chord, it's really just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 scale degrees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah. So
in major.
Yeah, and again, this is some of what's controversial about stuff like this is you think, well, that's just the first 6 notes of a major scale. Mm-hmm. So why are you calling it something different? And you're sort of denoting a different use, I guess, is the main idea.
Yeah.
We're not really worried about tonics right now necessarily.
Doesn't seem like it. I don't think I've heard one tonic this whole episode.
Not a good one.
Not a good one. Not a convincing one. Okay, so that's basically the major minor kind of Frankenstein scale that we're putting together here.
Yeah.
Moving on, and again, that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the major key.
Right.
Now, moving on, we have the major, which, as it sounds like, 2 major triads, a tone apart.
Yes.
So, for example, C major and D major.
And then, I should probably just do the, and then D major.
Yep.
So the two of them together. Yeah. Fascinating stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I like it. These all really have their own character.
They kind of do. You start to hear the difference, don't you?
Despite what I was saying earlier.
Yeah. And again, if we want to spread this out a little bit, I'm just kind of. It's not such a terrible sound, is it? Kind of get used to it. Another lover of whole tones and hexatonic scales and these kind of things was a composer by the name of Oliver Messiaen.
Oh yeah.
Who was afflicted with that most famous of musical diseases, synesthesia.
Yeah.
Where he heard colors and sound.
Yeah.
And to him, all of these things would have a different color to them.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's a helpful thing for me to think about because I listen for them not in terms of a different notes or trying to hear a tonic or a root so much as I'm listening to a particular color.
Wow. All sound is a collection of frequencies.
Yes. And colors. Of colors.
Starting low and then moving to high. And the higher you move, the more you get into other frequencies, other spectrums, and eventually the higher up you go is the light
spectrums, yeah.
So there's got to be something going on where he's reading sounds and seeing light. He's somehow processing the frequencies.
It's like just hearing like what is effectively a super high overtone.
Yeah.
Or something, and just perceiving that.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the major.
Yes.
And basically this is 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Right.
So the first 6 notes of a Lydian mode.
Yeah. There you go. See, some of these things are going to start to come back around, some of these modes.
Yeah.
Next example, we have a minor.
Minor.
From 2 minor triads, a tone apart.
So C minor and D minor. And when you play them together, let's make sure I do this right.
God, yeah, that's like kind of the horror movie when someone turns around and something that wasn't there, something that was there is not there anymore.
Yeah.
Or
right.
vice versa.
Yeah, even spread out. That's a little creepy.
Yeah.
For examples of this in real music, you have to. You need look no further than some of my own compositions.
No, yeah?
Yeah, where for example, there's a piece I wrote as part of my Sundials trios called "Time Flies Like a Shadow," which is that chord, that
interesting,
that hexatonic, yeah. Oops, sorry, hold on. So yeah. So that is B minor and C sharp minor.
Interesting. Wow.
A tone apart, right? Yeah.
I don't know what emotion that describes, but I'm glad I don't feel it on a daily basis. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we could say, okay, major sounds kind of happy and confident, minor sounds kind of profound or sad.
Yeah.
But when you get into this neck of the woods,
Yeah. So it's sort of
it gets specific.
Almost worried.
Yeah.
Maybe is the emotion.
Yeah.
I tend to think of them as colors. If the major one is kind of is kind of a blue-ish, like a dark blue, and then the minor one is kind of like a more washed out kind of gray or something.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Think like Messiaen.
Yeah. Try to. I'm not synesthetic, but and I'm kind of glad of that actually.
Well, there's only one more combination we can come up with.
Okay.
Should we go ahead and say what notes would be involved in the minor? That's 1, 2, flat 3.
So the notes involved in that would be, from a scale perspective, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah.
Just regular 4?
Yeah.
Okay, right, because you got a minor chord from that.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, man. The only other possible combination of these two things, actually, would be the minor-major, where we're actually starting from a minor and then sticking a major triad, a semitone apart.
Ooh. Yeah, because if they were a tone apart with this one, you would have some common tones, wouldn't you?
You would. Yes, you would.
Yeah, so that's not a good plan.
Let's see what this...
So we have a minor chord, C major, Yeah, we have a minor chord, C minor, and D flat major. So together, that's messed up right there.
That is interesting. It's very tense.
It is very tense.
That's pretty. What did you do?
I just put the D major chord down in an inversion.
Okay.
Yeah. So the D flat rather. It's just down an octave and in second inversion now. Kind of gets dramatic.
I feel like there's a major 7 happening in there somewhere, maybe.
Probably. Quite possibly.
Dreamy.
Yeah. There is a major 7 between G and A flat. Good ear.
So that's where that dreaminess comes from, but I don't know where all this. I guess the tension just comes from everything else being practically a half step away from it.
Yeah, right. Semitones apart. Yeah. Pretty fascinating stuff.
The minor major chord.
The minor major. Yeah. Well, there's a 7th chord we talked about back when we talked about 7th chords called the minor major 7th.
Oh yeah, the
about how it
forgotten
didn't
chord, as I
occur
call it.
diatonically, but that it was a minor triad and a major 7th.
Yeah.
Those intervals will be in this one. We've just added a couple more.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a minor, major plus 2 other tones.
Right.
And that's a chord.
And that's a chord.
Wow. Okay. Very cool stuff. Now, we have one other thing here. 2 other things here.
Mm-hmm.
The diminished. In which
Diminished
case,
hexatonic scale / chord.
yeah, it's like it's 2 major or minor or any combo thereof.
Yeah, that is a tritone apart.
Yes. So we talked about this a little while ago, didn't we?
Did we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the C major and the F sharp.
Yeah, with the Petrushka thing.
That would be an example, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So any 2 major or minor chords that are then a tritone apart. So I'll just keep it simple. I'll do C major, and then I'll do, in true Petrushka chord fashion, F sharp major.
Yeah. I mean, aside from just lying down on the piano, that's probably about as dense or as
Yeah, let's see if I
dissonant.
can get them spread out from each other a little bit. That'll usually alleviate some. Nah, it didn't really alleviate a whole lot, did it?
Not a whole lot. Just...
Yeah, this is not a fun. This color is black, isn't it?
It gave it more texture.
Yeah, it sounds like a film noir about World War II or something. Yeah, so
That boys overseas
are dying.
are dying.
So yeah, okay, and then the last one.
Stay away from war.
Let's just stay away. Yeah,
War is bad, okay?
Let's not, war is bad. Okay. All right. Anyway.
So that was an example of 2 major chords of tritone apart.
Yes.
Let's see what 2 minor chords of tritone apart sound like.
So I'm going to do something a little different. I'll do D minor,
Okay.
and I'll do A. So I'll do G flat minor then.
Or it'd be D minor and A flat minor.
D minor, A flat minor. Right. Yeah. You're correct. Yeah, that's C flat in that chord. Yeah. That's something, isn't
That
it?
really is something.
Yeah.
That might be even more like lying down on piano.
But again, look no further than my own music, but in my piece, Circles of Misunderstanding.
Oh my god.
I don't remember the whole thing, but yeah.
I sat here and recorded an entire bumper track, and it turns out I could have used 2 of
You
yours
could
the whole
have
time.
used all of my stuff. You could.
But me and Brian Malloy had a good time on that one.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
important.
as long as you had fun, that's what's really important.
Now, this last thing here, as far as mixing 2 chords together
I'm scared.
to come up with the hexatonic scale, we have something called the Spanish Phrygian.
Yeah. 2 major
hexatonic.
triads, a half tone apart.
Now, I don't know.
Semitone apart.
I don't know if this is going to be worse than the tritone thing, or
It's gonna be worse.
Semitones apart. Okay, let's see what you got. Let's do a C major and D flat major.
a
C major.
C major.
There you go.
Uh-huh.
And then a D flat major.
Okay. Stick them together and you got...
Yeah, and again, aside from your cat laying down on your piano.
Yeah. God, if only Uncle Biscuits knew she was a composer.
Yeah, that's just.
That's 2 cats lying down on the piano.
Yeah. A good rule of thumb is the closer they get together, the more dissonant they will sound, and the more like a cat on a piano they will sound. Really, the further away on the circle of fifths they are from each other, the more they will sound dissonant. As you approach things on the circle of fifths, like C minor and F minor,
Yeah.
it's much more consonant, right?
Yeah. If that's more consonant than the other one, then we have some serious dissonance going on in the first place, I think.
Yeah, and that is entirely true too.
Can we just play that as a scale one more time?
Which one?
Spanish Phrygian.
Yeah, okay. So Spanish Phrygian would have
Now it sounds
Phrygian when you
Yeah,
play it as a
yeah.
scale, yeah. Or it sounds Spanish
Yeah.
or whatever.
And Phrygian.
Yeah, and Phrygian.
Spanish Phrygian. That's really amazing stuff, man.
Yeah, this is fascinating. And that's the first 6 notes of a Phrygian mode.
Yes.
So that's probably why they call it Spanish Phrygian.
That's easy enough.
Yeah.
That's easy enough. And speaking of modes, we're going to spend this last little bit here. This won't
Okay.
take too long. Talking about how you might go about making hexatonic scales from modes.
Okay, let's do that.
Now, when I was trying to research this, of course, I hit the textbooks first, and then I got on the internet, and I just didn't find a lot of information on making hexatonic scales from these 7-note modes. So I'm going to kind of defer to you and what you think about some of these things,
Okay.
and why we think that we need to omit this particular note from what would otherwise be a 7-note scale.
Yeah, I am always happy to disseminate my opinion.
Speculate away, interpret away.
Okay.
Let us begin with the Ionian. We talked about this, actually. It's very straightforward.
Yes.
Ionian being the major scale.
Yes.
It is basically the 7-note major scale, and you nix the 7th note.
Yes.
So let's hear that Ionian hexatonic real quick.
So, right, so we're just...
Otherwise known as the major hexatonic.
Right.
Now, moving up one mode is the Dorian.
Hexatonic.
Hexatonic
Right.
Dorian. So the Dorian hexatonic would be just the first 6 degrees of the Dorian scale, right?
Yep.
Now here's something I ran into. Next up, moving up one mode, is the Phrygian hexatonic scale.
Right.
Which I thought this to be interesting because they're omitting the 2nd. And to me,
That's what makes the Phrygian mode.
that's what makes it Phrygi.
Yeah.
So let's hear what it sounds like if you just do 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, 7.
1, flat 3, 4, 5. Did I even do that right?
That sounds like a harmonic minor, doesn't it? A harmonic minor
yeah,
omitting
well,
the
it would
2nd.
be a subset thereof.
Phrygian hexatonic.
Yeah, while omitting the 2. I wonder if the 2 is omitted because of cyclic permutation somewhere, and we would have actually, like between 5 and flat 6, would have actually, if we had started on 5, we would have gotten a traditional Phrygian mode.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
A lot of math we'd have to do to sit down to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So moving on, the Lydian hexatonic.
Right. Again, we're omitting the 7th.
Again,
and
we're omitting
again,
the
we have the first 6 notes of a Lydian mode.
Symphony.
I should probably stop there, shouldn't I?
Yes, because we don't want to
Okay.
get sued.
All right, let's not get sued.
Okay, now the Mixolydian moving up.
Yep.
Mixolydian hexatonic seems to be 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you're actually omitting the 3rd.
Oh.
Which is very interesting.
Well, if you'd have omitted the 7th.
That takes away the Mixolydianness, flat 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know I said 7, but it should be flat 7.
It should probably be flat 7. Yeah. So.
So 1, 2.
1. Yeah. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7.
kind of like a little bit of pentatonic and a little bit of something else. Pentatonic meets mixolydian or something. Okay. Now, Aeolian.
Indeed.
This is one where we talked about earlier also.
Yeah.
Which is basically the minor hexatonic scale.
Yeah.
So it's 1,
1,
2,
2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7.
So the Aeolian, basically minor scale, next the sixth.
Yep.
Now, Matt.
Yes.
Finally, moving up one more step, we have the Locrian.
Locrian mode.
And it's a funny thing. You think you Google anything and it'll come up. There's all kinds of horrible things that you can Google, and the picture will come right up, and an article will come right up.
But a Locrian hexatonic mode is not one of them, huh?
It just is not.
Probably because it would have the same notes as the Phrygian hexatonic mode.
Maybe so.
Yeah. Or because Locrian is just the redheaded stepchild of the modes.
It almost seems like it's more regarded as a theoretical mode because no one ever fools with it.
No one ever messes with it. Well, there's an inherent tritone.
Yeah.
Right? It does not have a perfect fifth.
No.
Even the Lydian mode, which also has an inherent tritone, goes on to have a perfect fifth. There's no perfect fifth in the Locrian mode.
Yeah, right.
So it cannot be. It's hard to express a tonic, even a modal tonic, what we call a final, in Locrian mode.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the music we've been listening to or talking about / playing at this point is not real super concerned with tonics and leading tones anyway. So you wonder why someone hadn't tried it. My hypothesis would be that it is very similar to one of the other hexatonics that is can be constructed from the modes.
Yeah. And we always bring up our dear Bjork.
Dear Bjork.
Because I think she's the one person who actually wrote something that on the pop charts or whatever in the Locrian mode. She has pulled this off.
Yeah.
Now, she's not known to sound completely tonal.
There are like experimental jazz groups and things that play in Locrian mode.
Yeah.
I can't off the top of my head think of even any 20th century composers that messed around a whole lot with Locrian mode. But then again, I've never researched it. I'm sure there's some stuff out there.
And if you don't know what we're talking about and you're sitting in front of a piano, it's all the white notes from B to B.
Yeah, play all the white notes from B to B and you'll see how just uncentered that is.
But I imagine you kind of know what we're talking about if you're listening.
If you've made it this far.
In sequence as we recommend. Yes.
If you've made it this far into this podcast, this particular episode, let alone this podcast.
Yeah, not the show, just the episode.
Yeah. If you made it this far.
Hey, it has been a little bit of a long episode, so let's go ahead and hit this recap.
Recap it.
And get on out of here, shall we?
Yes.
Okay, so this whole episode has been about our good friend, the hexatonic scale.
Which is a scale made up of 6 notes.
6 notes, often a subset of another 7-note scale or mode.
Yes, indeed.
Pentatonic plus 1.
Indeed, yeah, pentatonic plus 1. Except it's so much more confusing than that.
Yes, apparently. Now we have the 2 key ones, obviously major and minor.
Hexatonic, major, and minor.
Hexatonic major being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just nixing the 7th.
Right. Minor hexatonic being 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. Minor scale just nixing the 6.
Exactly. And then we talked about the blues scales. These are a bit different, and it's almost like these are like a pentatonic scale, like we were saying, pentatonic plus 1. You know, because blues major is 1, 2, flat 3, 3, 5, flat 7.
Right.
Introduction of these blue notes, which makes it bluesy.
Yeah. So an addition of a note to the blues pentatonic scale, the blues major pentatonic scale.
And then even more bluesy would be the blues minor, because it involves 3 of the 3 blue notes that we talked about, right?
Right.
I think somewhere in there maybe flat 2 could be considered a blue note, but it's not one of the main ones, I don't think.
Yeah.
I could be making, Dr. Jeremy could be making that up. But anyway, blues minor, we have the 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5.
Yes.
5, and flat 7.
Flat 7, yep. And then we have to talk about the whole tone scale, which is a scale made up of nothing but whole tones. Nothing but whole steps.
Yeah.
Whole step, whole step, whole step, whole step, whole step. And you get 6 of them before you get back to the note you started on, and they are symmetrical, meaning there's one that has 6 of our 12 notes and the other one that has the other 6 of our 12 notes, and you can't transpose it beyond that. If you tried, you would just get the same notes as one of those original 2.
There's only 2 possible whole tone scales.
Only 2 possible whole tone scales, C and C sharp, if you want to use that lingo. All sorts of history in French music and in early 20th century music has no tonal center.
Yeah.
Because of the whole step, whole step, whole step thing. And then also symmetrical is the augmented scale, created by going up the scale, alternating half steps and minor thirds. So half step up, and then a minor third up from that, and then a half step up from that, and a minor third up from that. You will also get a limited number of those. I guessed 3.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
I think so.
Yeah. But yeah, also symmetrical, also lacking a tonal center.
Yes. And then we had the tritone scale, which was a doozy.
Indeed.
And harmonically equivalent to the Petrushka chord.
Right. Which is basically two major triads that had tritone apart, stacked on top of each other.
Yes. Ugh.
Yeah. And then the Prometheus chord.
Like a sandwich from hell.
Yeah, this is like a sandwich from hell. The Prometheus scale and / Prometheus chord, Mixolydian with the sharp 4. Or you can really think about it as the major scale with a sharp 4 and a flat 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, and very mystical sounding, used by Russian composers to sound mystical sounding.
Yeah, mystical.
Used by Polish composers to sound that way as well. Has its origins in the music. The name, at least, has its origins in the music of Alexander Scriabin, who used it a lot. There are other composers who have used it. Yeah.
For an example of the melody in the Prometheus scale, listen to the theme song of this episode.
Oh, yeah.
I call it Prometheus Shrugged.
Prometheus Shrugged. Nice.
Crazy, huh? Crazy.
Yeah, and then we talked about making hexatonic scales from basically taking triads and putting them together. So you can make a major by taking 2 major chords that are a whole step apart and just playing them together. And that creates a major hexatonic scale. You can do a major minor with a major chord and a minor chord a whole tone apart. You can do a minor with 2 minor chords that are a whole tone apart. You can do a minor major with a minor chord and a major chord that are a semitone, a half step apart.
Which is just crazy.
Yes, which is just crazy. And then there's the diminished scale, a la Petrushka, 2 major chords, a tritone apart. And then there's the Spanish Phrygian, 2 major triads, half tone apart,
And
which creates the first 6 notes of the Phrygian mode.
That's a fun one. I think I'm going to play with that one.
Yeah, and you can hear minor hexatonic chords in a lot of my music.
Yeah, check out Matt's music.
So,
what were the
there
2
you go.
examples you gave one more time?
Well, the minor one was from my
Sundial?
sundials. Yeah, time flies like a shadow. So that thing.
Yeah.
And then probably easier to find right now would be Circles of Misunderstanding, which would be the diminished one, the tritone apart one. Or sorry. That thing, Circles of Misunderstanding. Older piece, but
Love it.
there you go.
Love it.
Yeah.
The last thing we talked about was just the how you can make you can reduce a mode down to a hexatonic scale.
Yeah, right.
And it's just a matter of which is the one note I would leave out. You know,
Right, yeah.
That matters the least. That gives it least of its color.
Yeah.
or character.
In Ionian, get rid of the 7th.
Uh-huh.
In Dorian, also get rid of the 7th.
Uh-huh.
In Phrygian, get rid of the 2nd, which is a little strange.
Which is weird.
Yeah. In Lydian, get rid of the 7th. In Mixolydian, get rid of the 3rd. In Aeolian, get rid of the 6th. Same thing as hexatonic minor. Right? And in Locrian, error 404. You have broken the music professor.
Error 404. I mean, yeah, it's crazy. What's poor Locrian?
Poor Locrian, yeah.
Y'all, hey, you guys, now we're gonna have an episode on listener compositions coming up.
Yeah.
No
so
pressure.
start composing with some hexatonic music.
And if you don't get it between now and a few months from now, there'll be a part 2
Yes.
of that. So
Yes, they will.
work hard on that Locrian weirdness, or any of these hexatonic scales that we've mentioned. 'Cause
Indeed.
they're quite amazing.
Yes.
And not unlike the pentatonic scale, you can kind of utilize these in your soloing technique, and just have one less thing to go wrong.
Yeah.
You know, because if I'm trying to do a 7-note scale, if I'm trying to do in C major, and I knew I had a simpler pattern, you know, obviously you're safer
Yeah.
with fewer notes, if that makes any sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a soloist. I can't really even comment on this.
Who knows? Seems
Soloists.
like, yeah.
Right in.
This stuff would be great fodder from some solos, though.
Yeah. Cool. It almost seems like it just wouldn't matter what you do. But it would matter to some people.
It would matter to some, and making it matter what you do is a question of doing it artfully.
Yeah, making music.
Yep.
Because again, we're still making music here. We're just exposing. We're kind of exploring more complex emotions and moods
And ideas and
ideas.
moods, and yeah, they almost are more like colors than they are chords.
Yeah, very well put.
All right. So with that,
With that,
yeah, go out and have fun experimenting with hexatonic stuff.
yeah, see what you come up with.
We can't wait to hear.
I had a lot of fun myself. So.
Me too.
Until next time, guys.
So there you go. Another world of scales to explore. Don't forget our composition challenge. Come up with some of your own ideas and send them to us at info@musicstudent101.com. And don't forget, you can support us at patreon.com/musicstudent101.